What's up, guys? If the setup looks a little bit different, it's because it is. I finally got a gaming PC, so I do apologize if the audio's a little off, if the video's a little off. I didn't have a lot of time this week to set up my OBS or my new face cam or any of that, so I do apologize. But with that being said, let me show you this really good game I played. So the game starts off with the Italian game, as always. And this game, I decided I'm going to play the Evans Gambit. So after attacking my opponent's dark square bishop on c5, they take, I attack it again, they move it back to c5, I attack in the middle, they take, I castle, and right here, they take my pawn on c3, and this is a small inaccuracy. And the reason why this is a small inaccuracy is because there's a very, very, very good move in this position. All I'm doing, sacking the light square bishop. By sacking the light square bishop, this now allows me to open up the d file, and not only can I attack my opponent's dark square bishop, I'm also attacking my opponent's king. My opponent decides to move their king to e8, and there's a really good move in this position where I move my queen to h5, checking my opponent's king, and if they move their pawn, I can then take the dark square bishop, or if they just move their king to f8, I take the dark square bishop, and I keep the tempo going. But I decided I'm going to play a little bit simple. I'm just going to take the bishop in front of me. I don't want to get a little too fancy, you know? Just take what's in front of me. My opponent kicks out my queen. I take the pawn on c3, and now I am threatening this pawn here on g7, and my opponent blunders right away. They move their light square bishop to g4, and the reason why this is a blunder is because once I take this pawn on g7, I am now threatening my opponent's rook and my opponent's light square bishop, and you can take this if you want. I'm just going to take back, and then I'm still going to win this rook here in this corner. My opponent then plays queen to f6, and this is a good move, sorta, if you don't know how to play this. So the reason why this is a mistake is because there's a very simple move that a lot of people overlook. The move is dark square bishop to b2, and the reason why this move is so good is because if we go back, my rook is under attack here, my queen is under attack, you know, and this knight's under attack. But by moving the bishop to b2, now I'm defending this rook here on a1 because my opponent has to take my rook, and if they take my rook, I'm going to take their queen, and if they decide to take my queen, I'm going to take theirs, and now I'm still going to win a rook, the rook that is in h8, because it cannot escape. It's impossible. So my opponent takes my knight, I take their light square bishop, they move their knight, I take their rook, they move their king off the back rank, attacking my bishop, and I move my bishop back to b2. I'm already up in this position. I'm up 5 points of material. I didn't want to play too fancy. Just gonna move my dark square bishop back to b2. My opponent checks me. I move my king to h1. They get their knight active into the game. I get my knight active into the game, defending this f3 pawn here. My opponent is now moving their knight into the center of the battlefield and also trying to apply pressure to this f3 pawn. I decide, you know what? Let's just simplify. Let's simplify. So I take their knight. They take my dark square bishop. I move my rook, and this rook moving to g1 is such a good move. The reason why it is such a good move is because now I'm offering a trade. And if my opponent accepts a trade, I will be up a knight and a rook against a singular knight. If my opponent does not accept the trade, they allow me to infiltrate the 7th rank. And this is extremely dangerous because my opponent only has one pawn that's not on the 7th rank right now. Anyways, my opponent moves their king to c6. I check, and they make a mistake here by moving their king to b6. In this position, I made a small inaccuracy, a very small inaccuracy. When I was playing, I thought, you know what? Let me move my rook that's on g7, and now they're looking at each other. What I didn't think about, or I forgot, was that I should have done it the other way around. I should have brought my rook up to c7, and now I'm really controlling this back rank. It's a completely different game if I do that. Anyways, take that pawn. My opponent is now attacking my knight, and my opponent's just going to keep moving their knight, and they're going to be a little bit pesky about it. They check me. I move my king to the h file. You know, And eventually, after my opponent being a little bit pesky with their knight, moving it around, I finally get my rook to a good square where now I can kind of, sorta, I guess you could say, move my rook around safely. And they move their pawn to a5. And in this position, I take the pawn on h7. My opponent now moves their knight to attack my rook here. I simply and finally move my rook to the 7th rank. So now this pawn right here on b7 is under a lot of distress. My opponent checks me, and here this is a great move, and I just decide to bite the bullet. And you might be wondering, Ethan, why the hell would you move your king into the center of the board on g5 knowing there is a discovered attack if my opponent decides to move their move their knight off the file? Well, let me show you why. Because if I decide to move my king here, the position is pretty much even. And if I decide to hide it in this corner, well, that's GG. I just got checkmated. I got smothered by my own rook here. If I decide to move it down, same thing. I'm losing the momentum. It's an even position. I'm pretty much in a draw all over again, right? I'm in a 0-0 or a flat even position. So I decided, you know what? I'm just going to bite the bullet, move my pawn, or sorry, not my pawn, my king to g5. My opponent moves their knight to e7, cutting off my rooks looking at each other. I move my king to safety. I'm moving it to f4. My opponent takes my rook. I take their knight, and now I'm in a knight and a rook endgame. And in this position, after my opponent moves their king to c6, I find an extremely, extremely great move. Knight to c4. And you might be wondering, Ethan, why is this move so good? Well, let me show you. The reason why knight to c4 is such a good move is because right here I'm attacking this a5 pawn. And right here I'm also attacking this d6 pawn. But if you notice, it does not matter which pawn I take because they are both attacking this third pawn here on b7. So if my opponent decides to move their king to b5, well, I'm going to take, check. Sorry, let me draw that in red. Check. Boom. Win that pawn on b7. If my opponent decides to move their king to c5 to attack my knight, well, take and take. Just like that. Crazy, crazy move. Very overlooked, though. So my opponent checks me. I hide my king behind these two pawns here on the e and the f square. My opponent now is attacking not only my queen, but this pawn structure. And like I said, I take the pawn on a5. My opponent now moves their king to d6, trying to attack my rook. I then take the pawn on b7. My opponent takes my pawn on e4. I take back. And in this position, it is not only a rook, a knight, and 3 pawns against a singular rook and a king. But if you noticed, my opponent's king is not really in a good position. Can't move here, can't move here, can't move here, can't move here. The only legal spots they can move right now are 2. So my king is pretty much, or my opponent's king is pretty much stuck in a really, really bad spot. And after my opponent moves their rook to h8, attacking my h2 pawn, they resign because they realize there is nothing they can do to win this game. So yeah, I played a really great game. I'm pretty sure Game Review said I played like a 2250. I know Game Review is not the best metric to measure how well you're playing, but sometimes it just gives you confidence to see like, oh wow, you know what, I can play like a 2250, I can play like a 2000. Like it gives me at least some confidence knowing that I play like that. I think my current rating is 1548. I know I said I wanted to hit 1550. Actually, I've been saying I wanted to hit 1550 and get back to 1600 for like a month now, but 2 ELO off from 1550. I'm finally getting my groove back. You know what? I'm not going to complain. A win is a win. Progress is progress. That's just how it is. You know? I'm not going to complain. I'm going to take my wins here and there. And I'm going to slowly climb back to where I was. And I'm slowly going to gain more and climb to where I need to be. So yeah, like I said at the start of the video, I do apologize if the camera is off, the video is a little bit off, the audio is a little bit off. I do apologize. I am going to work on these settings sometime this week when I do have time. But yeah, with that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.